Robert jolted awake, his lungs dragging in air like he'd been underwater. The ceiling above him wasn't the bare plaster of his North City apartment, but the faded pale blue of his old bedroom. The smell of dust and cheap laundry detergent clawed at his nose. He sat up slowly, his heart thudding in his ribs, and reached for his phone on the nightstand with hands that trembled not from sleep but recognition. The screen lit up, the date glared back at him, bright and merciless. The same date. The day everything had begun to rot in his first life. The day Margaret and Melissa had stood in front of him with their careful smiles and soft voices and had played their parts like actresses in someone else's script. His fingers tightened around the phone until the plastic creaked. Last time, he had been flattered. He had been moved, he had been naive, he remembered every detail, the nervous laugh Margaret had given before telling him he was her first love, the tremble in Melissa's hands as she held out a bouquet of roses with tears in her eyes, the warmth of their perfume as they leaned in, the pitying glances of classmates who had already known the truth. He had believed it all because he had wanted to believe it. He had thought 2 of his oldest friends had chosen him, but they hadn't. They had chosen Daniel, always Daniel, and they had used him as a prop to polish Daniel's story. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and sat there in the pale morning light, breathing slowly, the worn carpet under his feet, the squeak of the ceiling fan, even the faint sound of his neighbor's radio, all of it wrapped around him like a ghost. In his first life, this was the day he had said yes. This was the day he had opened his heart and walked straight into a trap. This was the day he had given them everything. Robert stood and walked to the mirror hanging crookedly on the wall, his reflection stared back, a younger face, no scar on his temple, no coldness in his eyes yet. He touched his cheek as if confirming he was real, memory burned behind his eyes like a hidden flame. He could hear Margaret's soft, practiced voice, "I've loved you since we were children, Robert, you're the only one who's ever understood me." He could see Melissa's trembling lips and wet lashes, "Please, don't reject me, I don't have anyone else." He had clung to those words for years, even as they took Daniel's side, even as they handed him over piece by piece. Now he knew those lines weren't confessions, they were cues, written and rehearsed under Daniel's direction. Daniel, the boy who had smiled like a brother while hollowing out Robert's life behind the scenes. Daniel, the boy who had taken his designs, his awards, his future. Daniel who had stood back while Robert drowned, literally and metaphorically, and then claimed to be his savior. Robert's mouth curled into a small, quiet smirk. It was an expression he had never worn in his first life. This time, the muscles of his face felt different, stronger, more deliberate. He set the phone down, the date still glowing like a warning and a promise, the same moment, the same stage, the same actors. But the script was no longer in their hands. He had already made his first move, changing his university application before this day even arrived. In this life, their confessions would be nothing more than noise. He opened the window, the morning air slid across his skin, cool and clean. Outside, the street bustled with the same children walking to school, the same shopkeepers raising their shutters. To them, nothing had changed. To Robert, everything had. He drew in a breath and let it out slowly, watching it cloud faintly in the cool air. He remembered the drowning, the hospital, the empty promises at his bedside, the nights of humiliation. He remembered the fire that ate his childhood home. He remembered walking away alone and discovering freedom felt better than forgiveness. This time he wouldn't wait to be betrayed. This time he would play along just long enough to let them reveal themselves. Then he would walk away, and the world they had built on his back would collapse under its own weight. His lips moved in a whisper meant for no one but himself. They don't know this is my second life, but this time, the one being played, is them. In every school brochure, Robert was the face you'd find next to phrases like, model student, or future leader. Sharp black hair swept neatly over his brow, school blazer always pressed, voice low and polite no matter who spoke to him. Teachers adored him. Classmates admired him from a safe distance. He topped every exam without appearing to study, led every project without seeking the spotlight. Some whispered he was lucky, others thought he was simply gifted. The truth was simpler. Robert was just trying not to be a burden. His parents had made that clear early on. He wasn't something they wanted, just something they had. They weren't cruel, just cold. Business trips that lasted months, birthdays missed, hugs forgotten. At age 15, they signed the house over to him in the middle of dinner and vanished by morning. No explanation, no note, just a legal envelope and an empty hallway. But Margaret and Melissa had stayed. They lived 2 doors down, Margaret, with her soft-spoken confidence and perfect grades. Melissa, louder, more impulsive, always with a sketchbook in hand. They had known Robert since they were all 7, back when scraped knees and shared ice cream felt like eternity. "Your parents may not want you," Margaret used to say as she tightened his scarf during winter mornings, "but we'll never leave." Melissa would nod fiercely, eyes wide behind her round glasses. "We're your real family, Rob. Oath on chocolate milk." And he had believed them. He learned to cook because Margaret always forgot to eat when studying. He kept Band-Aids in his pencil case because Melissa sprained something every week. He fixed their computers, walked them home after cram school, and let them cry into his shoulder when college pressure made them buckle. To everyone else, Robert was the golden boy. But to them, he was something softer, something safe. Then there was Daniel. Daniel was the wild card, loud, charming, messy in every way. Robert was clean. They met at a school event when they were 12. Daniel had gotten in trouble for climbing the assembly stage and shouting rap lyrics into the mic. Robert had been asked to escort him to detention. Somehow, Daniel made him laugh on the walk there. And somehow, from that day, Daniel never left. He called Robert brother, more than he called him by name. He shared his lunch when Robert forgot his. Stood up for him when senior boys tried to haze him. He was the only one who saw Robert beyond the grades and the silence, or so Robert had thought. What Robert hadn't seen was how Daniel hated the way people looked at him when Robert entered a room. How every, "Wow, Robert's amazing," felt like another invisible slap to Daniel's face. How behind every smile Daniel threw him was a ledger, a record of every praise Daniel never got. Robert hadn't seen how Daniel whispered in Margaret's ear after study sessions, hadn't seen how Melissa's sketchbook began filling with drawings of someone with Daniel's jawline, hadn't seen how carefully Daniel fed his friends' lies wrapped in truths until they looked at Robert with guilt instead of trust. But he saw now. All of it. The memories flooded back like a broken dam. Margaret smiling at him one week, then kissing Daniel behind the gym the next. Melissa crying about making the wrong choice while still texting Daniel late at night. Daniel hugging him and saying, "I've got your back," only to turn and hand over Robert's college design portfolio as his own submission. In his first life, Robert hadn't figured it out until it was far too late, but in this one, he had weeks to prepare. He didn't need revenge, not yet, he just needed space, distance, control. So he did the one thing none of them would expect. He changed his college application. He walked to the dusty old guidance office, signed into the terminal when no one was looking, and erased his name from the local university's program, the one all 4 of them had agreed to attend together. The dream, as Margaret had called it. Instead, he applied to a university 2 cities away, prestigious, quiet. Far enough to be unreachable, but close enough to still watch the dominoes fall when the time came. He printed the confirmation, folded it into his wallet, and left the office with a steady breath. Last time, he had let everyone decide for him, which school, which path, which love. This time, the first decision would be his, and it would change everything. Margaret's voice chimed through the front gate intercom with practiced cheer. "Robert, open up, we brought snacks." Melissa's laughter followed instantly, loud and unrestrained. "And sparkling juice, this is a celebration, remember?" Robert opened the gate with a smooth press of the button, the corners of his lips lifting into a soft, polite smile. They entered like they always did, with confidence, with ownership, as if his home had always been theirs too. Margaret was in her pale blue cardigan and pleated skirt, hair curled just enough to look natural. Melissa wore a loose hoodie with a cartoon frog, ripped jeans, and oversized earrings that swung when she walked. They were opposites in style, in tone, in everything, and yet they had always been a matching set. "You haven't changed the living room," Melissa said, plopping down on the sofa like it was tradition. "Still smells like lemon cleaner and loneliness." Margaret giggled and set the snacks on the table. "He likes things neat, that's how he focuses." Robert only offered a soft hum in reply, stepping into the kitchen to fetch glasses. They were here to celebrate. University admissions had just gone out. They all knew that, but Robert also knew they weren't here for him. The kettle clicked, he poured the tea, calm and precise, hands steady. He'd had weeks to prepare for this moment. Rebirth didn't come with a manual, but it did come with memory. And his was sharp. As he carried the tray in, his phone buzzed, a single notification, from the school admin group chat. Announcement: valedictorian change. Daniel Young will now represent the student body at graduation. He paused mid-step. Margaret and Melissa were too busy arguing over cookies to notice the flicker in his gaze. That same message. Word for word. In his past life, it had broken him. He remembered the day clearly. How he'd worked 3 years straight to maintain a perfect GPA. How the counselor had smiled at him just days before, saying, "Robert, there's no competition, the stage is already yours." And yet, here it was again, a last-minute decision, and the replacement? Daniel. Just like before. Robert's smile didn't falter as he set the tray down. "Tea's ready." Melissa poured herself a cup, humming. "By the way, Robert, don't freak out, okay? We planned something, you'll love it." Margaret clapped softly. "It's a little surprise, you've been working so hard, we wanted to celebrate properly." Robert tilted his head. "Oh?" They both beamed. "Get changed," Margaret said, eyes twinkling. "We'll walk to the old Fountain Plaza." "Same place we used to play during middle school," Melissa added. "You'll see." Robert excused himself and went upstairs. The moment his door clicked shut, he opened the admin message again, scrolled, searched, and found what he expected. Daniel's father, new trustee, Melissa's mother, PTA vice chair, Margaret's uncle, principal's private donor, same strings, same puppeteers, same script, the love, the affection, the promises. They weren't for him, they were for the golden spot Daniel had wanted. He changed into a plain white button-down and dark slacks, safe, unassuming, the kind of boy they expected him to be. As he walked downstairs, both girls looked up. Melissa's gaze softened. "You still look too good, Rob." Margaret smiled, but hers was practiced. Perfect. They took his arms, Melissa on the right, Margaret on the left, and led him down the street. The sky was turning honey gold, a soft breeze brushed the cherry blossoms lining the path. It looked picturesque, like something out of a memory, and in a way, it was. Robert had lived this day before. At the plaza, candles were arranged in a soft circle, flickering inside small jars. Paper cranes dangled from the branches above, catching the light. A speaker sat in the center, playing soft instrumental music. Robert stepped into the center. The girls stayed just outside the candle ring. Margaret stepped forward first, holding a bouquet of white roses. Her voice trembled just enough. "Robert, you've always been the quiet strength in my life. You gave me peace. I never said it before because I was scared, but I've loved you since we were kids." She extended the bouquet, bowing her head slightly. Before he could react, Melissa rushed forward, clutching her own bouquet, red roses this time. "No, wait, Robert, don't listen to her first, listen to me." She stood right beside Margaret now, glaring at her before turning back to him. "You were always my safe place, my real one. I didn't realize it at first, but I love you too, I've always loved you." Robert stood between them, hands gently accepting both bouquets. He looked from one to the other. Margaret, pristine, measured, her eyes begging for control. Melissa, trembling, impulsive, her eyes begging for attention, but neither of them looked at him. Not really. They were watching each other, competing, performing. And then, his phone buzzed, again, a message. Sage lit up in the shared group chat. "Daniel. Guys, I fell off my bike, arms bleeding bad, need help, urgent." Silence. Then, Margaret. "Where are you?" Melissa. "Are you okay?" Without even a glance at Robert, both girls turned on their heels and sprinted back toward the road, red and white bouquets still in his hands. They didn't ask if he wanted to come. They didn't wait for his answer. They didn't even look back. Robert stood alone under the cherry blossoms, wind teasing the ends of his shirt. He looked down at the roses, white, red, both beautiful, both fake. With a quiet breath, he walked to the nearest trash bin, lifted the lid, and let the roses fall. The petals made no sound, only his smile remained, silent, controlled. This time, he wouldn't chase them. This time, he wouldn't break. This time, he was watching. Robert deleted the entire group thread without hesitation. No dramatic message, no guilt-ridden explanation, Just silence. He blocked Margaret first, then Melissa, then Daniel, then he turned off his phone. No goodbyes, no closure. He left a note on the counter for the housekeeper and packed one small backpack, a camera, 2 notebooks, fresh shirts, and a train pass. The next 30 days, he traveled alone, coastal towns with quiet harbors, high-altitude tea valleys, old railway stops where cherry blossom petals piled on platforms like snow. Each morning, he woke before sunrise, sketched people, drank bitter coffee, watched fishermen haul in the same nets. He stayed with locals, never staying longer than 3 nights. Never long enough to be missed. The silence healed what the noise had torn. He stood atop foggy cliffs, ate noodles under open skies, took photos of temple arches at golden hour. In each image, his reflection was faint in glass, half a shadow, always behind the lens. And it was enough. No rose-colored lies, no feigned affection, no betrayal. Just the quiet, and himself. When he returned home exactly 1 month later, the gate had vines creeping up the edge. The air smelled like dust and lavender detergent. And waiting on the porch, curled up on opposite steps, were Margaret and Melissa. Their faces were pale, red-rimmed eyes, wrinkled clothes, makeup smudged. Neither of them said a word when he stepped through the gate. They simply stood. Melissa's voice cracked first. "Rob." Margaret followed, quieter. We've been here since yesterday. Please." He didn't answer. He didn't stop walking. But inside, something shifted. He remembered another night. Years ago. When he was 14, and the night was colder than it should have been. He came home from school to find the front door wide open, the lights off, and the house stripped of warmth. A note from his parents sat on the kitchen table, brief, clinical. "We're going overseas, do not follow, the house is yours now." No apology, just instructions. That night, he walked to the lake, sat on the old dock with his knees to his chest, staring at the moon until it blurred, until he forgot how to breathe. And it was them who found him. Margaret had hugged him first, whispering, "Your parents may not want you, but we'll never leave." Melissa made hot chocolate from the thermos she brought. They sat beside him until sunrise. He almost believed it, even now. Almost. But memory is no longer just comfort, it was evidence. Margaret had gone to Guhua Temple with him once. He remembered lighting incense together, wishing in silence. He had whispered into the candlelight for love that stayed. She had laughed, and yet she gave the very amulet he bought there, the one meant for his future love, to Daniel. A joke, she'd said. Melissa had once cried when he let her read his first architecture draft. "You should sell this one day," she'd said. "It's genius." She sent that very same draft to Daniel weeks later, under his name, in exchange for creative direction credits on her student project. They thought he'd never find out. They thought he was the safe choice, the placeholder. But now, Robert had clarity. That night, the school hosted the final farewell BBQ, a tradition before graduation. He went. He smiled at teachers, took photos with juniors, ate grilled corn, let Margaret cling to his sleeve, let Melissa laugh like nothing had changed. He gave them both peace, because tonight, peace was his weapon. But just after dusk, he slipped away from the courtyard, into the back hallway near the gymnasium, where the music faded behind doors. And there, half shrouded by shadow, stood Daniel, slouched against the wall, phone in hand. And in front of him, on their knees, were the goddesses. Margaret's hair was falling out of its usual perfection, strands loose, face desperate. Melissa's cheeks were wet with tears. Robert stopped mid-step. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, quiet as the moment split open. Melissa clutched Daniel's pant leg. "Please, stop pushing him to talk to us. Every second with him is torture." Margaret's voice followed. "We can't pretend anymore. We only want you." Daniel stared down at them. "You said you could get him to stay." Melissa sobbed. "We thought he'd fall again. He always did." Margaret's voice shook. "But this time, he just left." Robert said nothing. He turned around before they saw him. Walked back into the courtyard. Let the sound of fireworks and laughter wash over his ears like rain. His smile returned, softer this time, but not empty. Because this time, the roles were reversed. They didn't know it, but they were no longer the ones choosing. Robert saw everything: the hallway, the begging, the trembling hands on Daniel's sleeve, the broken voices pledging their loyalty to someone else, and when he turned and walked away, it wasn't in anger, it was in silence, the kind that buried things. By the time he re-entered the BBQ, the air was thick with grilled meat and laughter. Sunset stained the courtyard in golden hues, streaked with pastel pink and soft amber. Margaret ran up to him first, her cheeks flushed as if nothing had happened. "You disappeared. We saved your favorite skewers." Melissa followed with a thermos. "Here, your throat gets sore easily in summer." Someone had even draped his old varsity jacket over a chair, freshly washed and still warm from the dryer. They tried to stitch the old story back together. But he wasn't reading the same book anymore. A classmate, one of the more nosy ones, approached with a teasing grin. "So, Robert, both goddesses confessed to you. Who are you going to pick?" Everyone turned toward him, the table of friends, some juniors giggling in the back, even Margaret and Melissa paused mid-breath. Robert set down his drink, smiled calmly. "I'll answer that," he said, "on the first day of school." Cheers erupted, playful protests, whistles. He leaned back in his chair, watching them all. In another life, he would have panicked over a question like that. He would have gone home, lost sleep, written pros and cons in a notebook. But not in this life, not with these memories. Night fell. Fireflies began to emerge near the hedges. Daniel appeared from behind the tents, his smile faint but sharp. He clapped Robert's back. "Come on," Daniel said. "Shell collecting, just like old times." Robert's stomach tensed. The beach behind the school was quiet at night, the kind of place they used to sneak to when skipping exams. He remembered those nights well, but not fondly. Still, he nodded. The two of them walked together through the dark trees behind the dormitory fence, laughter from the BBQ fading into distant hums. Daniel didn't say much, just kept walking. When they reached the shoreline, moonlight reflected off gentle waves, seafoam kissed their shoes. Daniel crouched near a patch of wet rocks. "Look, the tide's low, might be luckier this year." Robert stepped forward slowly, eyes on the surf. Something felt. Crack. The pain came before the sound, sharp, white, blinding. He crumpled sideways into the sand, blinking as the moon spun. Then everything vanished. Water. Dark. Weightless. His body sank. Salt stung his mouth. Pressure crushed his ears. His arms flailed weakly, nothing responded. He opened his eyes underwater just in time to see three shapes. Two of them diving in, long hair swirling like kelp, frantic arms cutting through the surf. And both of them, Margaret and Melissa, swam right past him. Toward Daniel. One hand reached for him underwater, his, desperate, unseen, and he blacked out again. When he woke up, everything was white, hospital ceiling, IV line in his arm, throat raw, chest bandaged. The nurse looked startled. "You're awake, Robert, don't move too fast." His head turned slowly to the side. Margaret sat at the edge of the bed, eyes red, lips trembling. Melissa stood nearby, gripping the blanket in her fists. "We thought you were Daniel," Melissa said softly. "It was so dark." Margaret choked. "You have similar builds in the water and we panicked." Robert didn't say a word. He just looked at them, like strangers, like two people he no longer knew. The doctor came in, checked his vitals, gave instructions. And just as quickly as they came, the girls left. Because word had reached them, Daniel had caught a cold. Fever, he was in the East Wing. They barely touched the door on their way out. Didn't look back, didn't ask if Robert could walk, if he was afraid, if he was in pain. They just left. He sat there in silence. Hours passed. No one returned. He picked up the necklace they had set on the table, the Gu Hua amulet, waterlogged and still faintly warm. Robert pressed it to his chest. Then set it back down. The nurse peeked in. "No one's coming to take you home?" Robert shook his head once. "It's fine, he said, voice steady. I'll wait for school to start. A small smile ghosted his lips. Then we'll be in different cities, forever. The school year began with excitement, cheers, and glittering banners strung across South University's courtyard. Margaret stood by the fountain, flawless in her ivory blouse and navy skirt, holding a welcome bouquet with trembling fingers. Melissa leaned on the railing of the Student Union building, scanning every incoming face through her designer sunglasses. Her heart pounded with a rhythm she hadn't felt in weeks. Robert wasn't answering messages, not hers, not Margaret's. But today was the first day of the new semester. Surely he'd appear. They had rehearsed their smiles, practiced the apologies, even prepared a chance meeting moment by the entrance gate. But Robert never showed. Their carefully arranged timing dissolved minute by minute. Anxious, Margaret opened the university app, searching for his class schedule. Then her hand slipped. Her screen shook in her palm. Robert's profile had been updated. School, North City University. Campus, 1,800 kilometers away. Program, Advanced Innovation in Applied Design. Melissa's jaw clenched. That's impossible. He was accepted here, we all were. He never said he switched. Margaret's voice cracked. He didn't tell anyone. That wasn't the worst part. By nightfall, they were on a train back to their hometown, clutching the illusion that maybe he'd gone home for a visit. But when they arrived, all that waited for them was smoke. Robert's house was gone. Reduced to blackened rubble, charred walls, and cold ashes. Yellow tape flapped against the mailbox. A neighbor walked past, arms full of groceries. Melissa rushed toward her. What happened? Where's Robert? The woman raised an eyebrow. He doesn't live here anymore. Sold the place 3 weeks ago. Sold it? To who? Margaret stammered. Some guy who said he wanted to burn it in memory of a dead relative, paid cash. Melissa's breath hitched. He let them burn it. He supervised it. The woman shrugged. Smiled the whole time. They stood in silence before the ruin. Even the mailbox had melted into slag. Gone were the roses Margaret planted when they were 12. Gone was the swing Melissa built with him under the plum tree. Gone was the boy they thought they had cornered. 3 nights later, South University hosted the annual Welcome Gala. The auditorium brimmed with laughter and music. Daniel stood center stage, microphone in hand, eyes glowing beneath the spotlights. He was performing one of his signature dramatic monologues, twisting the words of a famous poet into a flirtation for the crowd. It was almost perfect. Until it wasn't. The lights flickered. Then, Makoto Daniel Chen, please step down from the stage. A calm, male voice rang through the speaker system. The music cut. Whispers spread, students looked around. A few phones came out. 2 men in plain black suits entered from the back, walking down the aisle. Daniel tried to keep smiling. I'm in the middle of, one man held up a warrant. You are under arrest for assault, intellectual property theft, and falsification of academic documents. The audience gasped. Margaret shot up from her seat. Wait, what? Melissa stood, hands shaking. This has to be a mistake. But Daniel was already being handcuffed. Cameras flashed, phones recorded. And soon, the entire school knew. The next day, social media exploded. South University. Scandal, Makoto Chen. Plagiarist, scholarship. Stolen, Robert. Lie original designer. The leaked reports were thorough. Daniel had assaulted Robert near the beach, stolen his USB drive containing a prototype design, submitted it to the National Committee, and claimed the scholarship and internship Robert was promised. Worse, he used Margaret and Melissa to deflect suspicion. Their fathers were trustees. Their support sealed Daniel's position. It was all connected. It had all happened before. Only this time, Robert had exposed it before the cycle could repeat. Margaret and Melissa tried to respond quickly. A live stream appeared that evening. Margaret, in a pale cardigan, clasped her hands tightly. We didn't know what Daniel was planning. Melissa, tear-streaked, sat beside her. We thought he was our friend. We trusted him too. We were victims, just like Robert. A few viewers sent heart emojis, but more sent vomit reacts. Someone even clipped the BBQ footage from earlier that summer, the hallway moment. Every second with him is torture, we only want you. That line played on loop in every comment section. Another clip showed the beach incident, grainy footage captured by a night drone nearby. The girl swimming past Robert, then comforting Daniel afterward. Someone captioned it. Oops, we saved the wrong man. Their PR attempts backfired. Hate messages flooded their inboxes, their internships quietly vanished, sponsors ghosted them. They went quiet after that. North City University, a quiet library bathed in warm light. Robert leaned back in his chair, phone in hand, earbuds in place. He watched the interview clip. Margaret's cracking voice, Melissa's watery eyes, the blame shifting, the desperation. He didn't smile out of malice. He smiled out of understanding. They're not evil, he murmured to himself. They're just selfish. Then he looked out the window, a soft breeze rustling golden trees. They don't know this is my second life, he said calmly. A pause, then, with a wry smirk. But this time, the one being played is them. The courtroom was silent, every seat taken. Screens behind the judge displayed irrefutable evidence, time-stamped design files, GPS-tagged medical records, financial transfers, and old messages with sickening undertones. Margaret and Melissa sat on the defense bench, silent, pale. Daniel had already been sentenced, 6 months probation, expulsion, and public disgrace. Now, the court focused on the two women once known as South University's golden pair. Robert sat alone. No lawyer beside him, he was representing himself. The judge reviewed the final documents and said, the plaintiff, Robert Lee, is entitled to compensation for damages, both emotional and material. The total amount shall be. Robert stood. Your Honor, he interrupted, voice calm, steady, unwavering. I'm not here for the money. A hush fell across the courtroom. I only want $1 from each of them. Gasps spread. Even the judge blinked. Are you sure? Robert nodded. This isn't about money, it's about closure. By the time the news broke, it wasn't just a scandal, it was a purge. Margaret's father lost his trustee seat, Melissa's mother was removed from her advisory role, donations were revoked, campaigns withdrawn, influence evaporated. Reporters called it the White Rose Fall. Clips of their BBQ confessions, their teary live streams, their alliance with Daniel, were played endlessly. South University updated its ethics code the next month. Robert didn't attend any celebration parties. He had a quiet dinner with David and 3 new classmates from North City, May, Lucas, and Wen. They roasted dumplings over a small fire outside their dorm, wrapped in scarves and laughter. David toasted his soda can. To you, Robert, to your spine of steel. Robert smirked. 2. Learning how to finally say goodbye. The snow came early that year. It blanketed the entire North City campus, soft and silent. Robbers. T walked out of the library, thermos in hand, coat zipped up, scarf tight. At the gate stood 2 figures, Margaret, Melissa. Both in long winter coats, soaked from the falling snow, holding items in their bare, red hands. Melissa stepped forward. This belongs to you. She offered a glass box. Inside sat the original award plaque, his design, his name, now fully credited. Margaret followed, holding a sealed folder. Court judgment, cleared, you've won everything. Then, almost trembling, she took out one final item, a faded red string, an old charm tied to it. The amulet Robert once left at Guhua Temple, the one she had given away to Daniel. Now it was returned. Their hands shook as they offered it. Melissa looked up. We're sorry. Margaret whispered, can we start over? Robert didn't flinch, didn't blink. He simply looked at the items in their hands, then at the faces he once would have died for. The design draft is mine, he said quietly. The justice is mine. He paused. But your place in my life is gone. He didn't yell, didn't curse. He simply turned and walked. The snow crunched under his boots. Behind him, the 2 girls dropped to their knees, crying quietly into the frost. David was waiting under a nearby tree. Who were they? He asked softly. Robert took a sip from his thermos. Just people I used to know.